The scream pierced through the primordial darkness like a blade through flesh. In the dying embers of twilight, where shadows danced with death itself, something ancient stirred. Blood dripped from massive claws onto the scorched earth, while somewhere in the distance, a lone figure clutched a sharpened stone with trembling hands. This is not a story of heroes. This is a story of survival, of a time when humanity was nothing more than prey, scattered across a world that wanted them dead. Tonight we witness the final hunt of the last warrior, a female Homo habilis named Kira, whose name would echo through the darkness long after her bones turned to dust. Some say the greatest predators walked on 4 legs. They were wrong. The most dangerous beast was the one that refused to give up, even when hope itself had been devoured by the night. The crimson moon hung low over the African savanna like a wound in the sky, casting everything in shades of dried blood and shadow. The acrid smell of smoke drifted through the air, mixing with something far more sinister, the metallic tang of fresh death that made even the bravest souls retreat to their caves. Kira crouched behind a cluster of thorn bushes, her callous fingers gripping a crude stone axe so tightly her knuckles had turned white. At barely 4 feet tall, with arms longer than her torso and a face that bore the weathered marks of countless battles, she was the last of her kind in these cursed lands. The others, her family, her tribe, her entire world, had been consumed by the shadows that now ruled the night. They came from the east, she whispered to herself, the words barely audible above the distant howling that made her spine crawl. First the great cats with teeth like daggers, then the massive hyenas with laughs that drove men mad, and finally them. The ground beneath her feet trembled, not from earthquake or thunder, but from something far more terrifying. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, hunting. Through the sparse vegetation, she could make out shapes moving in the darkness, hulking silhouettes that defied description. These were not the familiar predators of her childhood nightmares. These were something else entirely, something that had crawled out of the deepest, most forbidden corners of the prehistoric world. A twig snapped somewhere behind her. Kira's blood froze. Slowly, ever so slowly, she turned her head. 2 glowing eyes stared back at her from the darkness, reflecting the blood moon's light like burning coals. The creature's breathing was slow, measured, as if it was savoring this moment before the kill. So, a voice rumbled from the shadows, deep, guttural, almost human but wrong in every conceivable way. The last little mouse finally shows herself. Kira's hand tightened around her weapon. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird desperate to escape. But she didn't run. She couldn't run. There was nowhere left to go. Instead, she stood up slowly, facing the darkness that had claimed everything she had ever loved. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "If I'm going to die tonight," she said, raising her stone axe, "then you're coming with me." The creature's laugh was like the sound of bones breaking. Dawn never came. For 3 days now, the sky had remained locked in an eternal twilight, as if the sun itself was too terrified to show its face. The air was thick with ash and the smell of decay, making every breath a struggle. This was no longer the world Kira had been born into. This was hell on earth, where the natural order had been shattered and remade by forces beyond comprehension. She moved through the twisted landscape like a ghost, her bare feet silent on the cracked ground. Every shadow could hide death. Every sound could be her last warning. The creature from the night before, whatever it had been, was still hunting her. She could feel its presence like a weight on her soul, pressing down, suffocating, inescapable. The remains of her village lay scattered across a valley that had once been green and full of life. Now it was a graveyard of broken bones and ash-covered stones. The cooking fires had been extinguished forever. The children's laughter had been silenced. The elders' stories would never be told again. "Kala," she whispered, kneeling beside a small pile of rocks that marked where her daughter had been buried. "Mama's going to make them pay. All of them." A sound made her freeze, the scrape of claws against stone. She turned slowly, scanning the skeletal remains of dead trees that surrounded the valley. Something was moving up there, something large enough to make the brittle branches sway. Then she saw it. The creature was unlike anything from the natural world. It stood upright like a man, but was easily twice her height, with arms that hung down past its knees and hands that ended in claws as long as her fingers. Its skin was mottled gray and black, as if it had been burned and healed over and over again. But the worst part was its face, almost human, but with eyes that held an intelligence that was both ancient and utterly malevolent. "You killed them all," Kira said, her voice carrying across the valley like an accusation. The thing tilted its head, studying her with those burning eyes. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone. "I did not kill them, little mouse. I freed them from the burden of existence. They should thank me. They were children. They were prey, as are you." Without warning, the creature leaped from the tree, covering the distance between them in a single bound. Kira rolled to the side, just as massive claws raked the ground where she had been standing, sending up a spray of dirt and pebbles. She came up running, her stone axe clutched in both hands. Behind her, she could hear the thing's footsteps, heavy and relentless. Each impact shook the ground like thunder. This wasn't just a hunt anymore. This was war, and only one of them would see another sunset. The chase led them through the nightmare landscape of what had once been paradise. Twisted trees reached toward the sky like the fingers of the damned, their bark black and weeping a substance that smelled like rotting flesh. The ground was pocked with craters where lightning had struck, leaving behind pools of water that reflected nothing but darkness. Kira's lungs burned as she ran, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. The creature behind her moved with the relentless patience of death itself, never quite catching up, but never falling behind. It was playing with her, she realized, savoring the fear that rolled off her in waves. But Kira was no ordinary prey. She had survived the Great Drought when she was barely more than a child. She had faced down saber-toothed cats with nothing but rocks and determination. She had watched her entire world burn and had still found the strength to keep breathing. This monster might be bigger, stronger, and more vicious than anything she had ever faced, but it had made one critical mistake. It had made this personal. The valley opened up ahead of her, revealing a sight that made her heart skip. The ancient tar pits, pools of black death that had claimed countless animals over the millennia. The bones of long-dead beasts jutted up from the surface like broken teeth, while the air above shimmered with toxic vapors. Perfect. Kira skidded to a halt at the edge of the largest pit, spinning around to face her pursuer. The creature emerged from the shadows, its claws gleaming in the sickly light. It was breathing hard now, its massive chest rising and falling with exertion. "Clever little mouse," it rumbled, circling the edge of the pit like a predator toying with wounded prey. "But there is nowhere left to run. No more tricks. No more delays." "You're right," Kira said, her voice steady despite the terror that threatened to overwhelm her. "No more running." She raised her stone axe, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had already died inside and had nothing left to lose. "My name is Kira," she said, her voice carrying across the pit like a battle cry. "I am the daughter of Nika the Brave and Jobu the Wise. I am the mother of Kala the Beautiful and Miko the Strong. I am the last of my people, the final voice of my tribe, and the woman who is going to send you back to whatever hell spawned you." The creature's laugh was like the sound of breaking bones. Bold words for someone about to die. "Then come and kill me." The thing lunged forward with a roar that shook the very air, its claws extended and ready to tear her apart. But Kira was no longer there. She had thrown herself backward into the tar pit, disappearing beneath the black surface with barely a splash. The creature skidded to a halt at the edge, its burning eyes scanning the dark liquid for any sign of movement. Seconds passed, then minutes. Finally, it began to laugh again, a sound of pure, malicious satisfaction. That's when Kira exploded from the pit behind it, her entire body coated in black tar, her stone axe raised high above her head. "Surprise!" she snarled, and brought the weapon down with every ounce of strength she possessed. The axe bit deep into the creature's shoulder, sending up a spray of dark blood that hissed and steamed where it hit the ground. The thing let out a roar of pain and rage that echoed across the prehistoric wasteland like thunder, spinning around with claws extended to rip Kira's head from her shoulders. But she was already moving, rolling away from the strike and coming up in a crouch several feet away. The tar coating her body made her look like a demon risen from the depths of the earth, and her eyes blazed with a fury that matched the creature's own. "First blood to me," she panted, raising her weapon again. The stone blade was chipped now, stained with the monster's otherworldly essence, but it had held. It had cut deep. The creature touched its wounded shoulder, bringing its claws away wet with blood. When it looked at her again, something had changed in its expression. The casual cruelty was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous: respect. "You are not like the others," it rumbled, circling her slowly. "They screamed. They begged. They died like the animals they were. But you Leah, you fight like something more." "I fight like a mother who watched her children die," Kira snarled back. "I fight like a woman with nothing left to lose. I fight like the last human being on this cursed earth." "Human," the creature repeated, as if tasting the word. Such a small, fragile thing to claim such a grand name. Your kind are nothing but evolved vermin, scurrying through the shadows while your betters rule the light. And yet I'm the one who drew first blood. The thing's eyes flashed with anger, and it lunged again. This time, Kira was ready. She sidestepped the attack and brought her axe around in a vicious arc, aiming for the creature's knee. The blade struck home with a crack that sounded like breaking wood, and the monster stumbled, its leg buckling beneath its weight. But even wounded, it was faster than anything had a right to be. Its backhand caught Kira across the chest, sending her flying through the air to crash into a pile of ancient bones. Stars exploded behind her eyes, and she tasted blood in her mouth. The creature limped toward her, its wounded leg dragging slightly. "Did you really think you could defeat me, little mouse? I have walked this earth since before your species learned to make fire. I have fed on the fear of 10,000 generations. You are nothing but another meal, another scream to add to my collection." Kira struggled to her feet, using the pile of bones for support. Her ribs felt like broken glass grinding against each other with every breath, and her vision kept blurring in and out of focus. But she was still breathing, still fighting. "Maybe," she gasped, spitting blood onto the ground. "But I'm the meal that's going to give you indigestion." She grabbed one of the bones from the pile, a massive femur from some long-dead beast, and hefted it like a club. It was heavier than her stone axe, but longer, giving her better reach. And the jagged end where it had been broken looked sharp enough to do some serious damage. The creature paused, stunning her with those burning eyes. For the first time since their dance of death had begun, it looked uncertain. "You should have stayed hidden in your cave," it said. "You should have died with the rest of your kind. It would have been easier." Kira raised the bone club, her battered body screaming in protest. Easy never taught anyone anything worth knowing. The final round was about to begin. The prehistoric wasteland held its breath as predator and prey circled each other in the shadow of the ancient tar pits. The air was thick with tension and the metallic smell of spilled blood, both human and something far more sinister. Overhead, the blood-red moon watched like a malevolent eye, casting everything in shades of violence and death. Kira's improvised bone club felt heavy in her hands, but solid, reassuring. The creature across from her was wounded but far from defeated, its burning eyes never leaving her as it searched for an opening, a moment of weakness it could exploit. "You know," the monster said, its voice like grinding stone, "I have lived for eons. I have seen empires of your kind rise and fall. I have watched as they discovered fire, learned to hunt, developed language. And do you know what I learned from observing them? That you talk too much?" Kira shot back, adjusting her grip on the bone. The thing's laugh was like the sound of ice cracking. "I learned that courage is just another word for stupidity. Your bravery will not save you. Your determination will not protect you. In the end, you will scream and die just like all the rest. Then stop talking and prove it." The creature moved with lightning speed, its claws whistling through the air where Kira's head had been a split second before. She ducked low and swung the bone club in a wide arc, catching the monster in the ribs with a satisfying crack. Dark blood sprayed across the ground as the thing stumbled backward, clutching its wounded side. But it recovered quickly, lashing out with its good arm. Claws raked across Kira's back, tearing through skin and muscle like paper. She bit back a scream and spun away, putting distance between herself and those deadly talons. The pain was incredible, fire racing across her nerves, blood flowing down her back in warm rivers. But she had felt worse. She had given birth alone in a cave during a thunderstorm. She had set her own broken bones and stitched her own wounds. Pain was an old friend, and she had learned long ago not to let it control her. Getting tired? She taunted, circling to keep the wounded creature in sight. "Maybe you should take a nap, forever." The monster's response was a roar of pure rage that made the very air tremble. It charged forward like an avalanche of hate and hunger, its massive form blotting out the moon. This time, there was no dodging, no clever tricks, just raw collision. Kira braced herself and met the charge head-on, driving the sharpened end of the bone deep into the creature's chest. The impact drove her to her knees, but she held on, pushing the makeshift spear deeper even as claws raked across her shoulders and arms. The creature's scream was unlike anything she had ever heard, part animal, part something else entirely. It staggered backward, the bone protruding from its chest like a grisly flag. Dark blood bubbled from the wound, steaming in the cool night air. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Predator and prey, both wounded, both bleeding, both refusing to surrender. "Impossible," the creature whispered, its voice barely audible. "You are nothing. Less than nothing. How?" Kira struggled to her feet, swaying slightly from blood loss and exhaustion. Her stone axe lay forgotten in the dirt, but her hands were steady as she faced down the monster that had destroyed her world. "Because," she said, her voice carrying the weight of every loss, every death, every moment of grief and rage that had brought her to this place, "I'm not fighting for myself anymore. I'm fighting for every child you murdered, every family you destroyed, every dream you turned into a nightmare." She took a step forward, and the creature actually retreated. "I'm fighting for the future you tried to steal." The bone spear jutted from the creature's chest like a monument to defiance, dark blood pooling at its feet as it swayed on legs that no longer seemed capable of supporting its massive frame. But even mortally wounded, even with death creeping through its veins like poison, it was still the most dangerous thing Kira had ever faced. You think you've won?" The monster wheezed, each word accompanied by a spray of black blood. "You think killing me ... changes anything?" Kira picked up her stone axe from where it had fallen, her movements careful and deliberate despite the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, and the wounds on her back continued to weep blood onto the barren ground. I think she said quietly. "That you're about to find out what happens when someone refuses to be afraid of you." The creature made one last desperate lunge, its claws extended in a final attempt to take her with it into death. But it was too slow, too weak, too consumed by the darkness that was finally claiming it. Kira sidestepped the attack easily and brought her axe down in a powerful overhead swing. The stone blade caught the monster in the side of the neck, biting deep through flesh and bone. The creature's eyes went wide with shock, and something that might have been fear before the light in them flickered and died. It toppled forward like a felled tree, crashing to the ground with an impact that shook the earth. Dark blood spread outward from the body in an ever-widening pool, and steam rose from the wound where the axe had found its mark. Kira stood over the corpse for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. The silence that followed was deafening after so much violence and pain. No more roars, no more threats, no more nightmares given flesh and fury, just silence. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the eastern horizon began to lighten. Dawn was coming. Real dawn, with golden light and the promise of warmth. The endless twilight that had gripped the land was finally breaking. Kira raised her face to the growing light and felt tears streak down her cheeks. The first tears she had allowed herself since this all began. They were tears of grief for everything she had lost, tears of pain for everything she had endured, and tears of relief that it was finally over. But as the sun rose higher, painting the wasteland in shades of gold and red, she realized something that made her heart skip. The creature's body was already beginning to dissolve, breaking apart like ash in the wind. Within minutes, there was nothing left but a dark stain on the ground and the bone spear she had driven through its chest. No proof, no evidence, nothing but her word and her scars to testify to what had happened here. She picked up the bone spear, surprised by how light it felt now. As she examined it more closely, she noticed something strange. Symbols carved into its surface, symbols that definitely hadn't been there before. They seemed to glow faintly in the morning light, and when she touched them, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the rising sun. A gift, a weapon, a promise that the fight would continue. Because as the light spread across the landscape, revealing green shoots pushing up through the ash and the sound of birds calling in the distance, Kira realized that this hadn't been the end of her story. It had been the beginning. The last hunter had become the first guardian. And somewhere in the growing light, new threats were already stirring, drawn by the scent of change and the promise of fresh prey. But that, as they say, is a story for another time. Kira shouldered her new weapon and began walking toward the rising sun, leaving the dark valley behind her. Her footsteps were steady despite her wounds, and her shadow stretched long and straight behind her. The shadow of someone who had looked death in the face and refused to blink. The age of monsters was ending. The age of humanity was about to begin.